Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wondered if the way someone asks you a question can actually change your memories? Well, today we're diving into some fascinating research that revisits a classic psychology study to see just how strong that effect really is, especially when it comes to something as important as eyewitness testimony. This paper tackles a really famous idea in psychology: the misinformation effect, first shown by Loftus and Palmer in 1974. They did this cool experiment where people watched videos of car crashes and then were asked questions about them. What they found was wild if you use the word like smashed to describe the cars. People estimated they were going faster and even remembered seeing broken glass that wasn't there, compared to if you used a gentler word like bumped. This made everyone think that eyewitness memories are super fragile and easily messed with by the questions asked, which has huge implications for court cases and police interviews. But here is the thing. While that original study was super influential, a lot of other researchers have tried to reproduce it, and the results have been kind of all over the place. Some studies found the effect, others didn't, and it left people wondering how reliable this whole idea of misleading questions manipulating memory really is. The researchers behind this new study wanted to get to the bottom of it. They thought maybe the original effect only happens under very specific conditions, particularly when our memory for an event isn't super strong anymore. So they designed 6 big studies. Think of them as superpowered attempts to replicate and extend the original work. They basically redid Loftus and Palmer's experiments with way more people to make sure their results were solid. In their first 2 experiments, they did very close replications of the original 1974 study. They showed participants videos of car crashes and then asked them about the speed using different verbs like smashed or bumped. But in these first 2 high-powered replications, they found pretty much no effect. The wording of the question didn't make a significant difference in how fast people thought the cars were going. This was a real wake-up call. If these close replications aren't showing the original effect, then maybe that original groundbreaking finding wasn't as robust as we thought, or as the researchers suspected. Maybe the original effect only shows up when memory is a bit fuzzy. To test this memory fading idea, they did something clever. In experiment 3, they didn't even show participants a video. They just asked them to imagine a car accident and then use different verbs to describe it. And guess what? When people were just imagining, the wording made a huge difference. People reported different speeds, perceived more broken parts, and rated the accident as more severe just based on whether they heard smashed or bumped. This shows that if there is no actual memory to rely on, words can heavily shape your perception. Then, in experiment 4, they tried to recreate a situation where memory might be less clear without necessarily waiting for it to fade. They had people watch a video and then immediately write about a completely unrelated topic, like a movie. The idea was that this distraction would interfere with the memory-forming process. But even then, when they asked about the accident later, they found no real difference based on the question wording. The memory, even if slightly disturbed by the writing task, was still too strong to be swayed by a single verb. They pushed this idea further. In experiment 5, they introduced a delay. Participants watched a video, then either wrote about the accident or a movie. Then, crucially, they waited a whole day before answering questions about the accident. This was to see if a bit of time passing would weaken the memory enough. And even with this delay, they didn't see a strong effect in the initial analysis. However, when they looked deeper into the data from experiment 5, specifically at participants who didn't even remember which video they had seen, they found something interesting. For these individuals, the wording did matter. Those asked with smashed reported higher speeds and more severity than those asked with bumped. This hints that the effect might pop up when memory is really unclear or forgotten. This led them to their final and most critical experiment, experiment 6. Here, they directly compared what happens when people are asked about an accident after a short delay versus a long delay. They had one group answer questions about a car crash video just 18 hours later, while another group waited for almost a month. And this is where they found the key result. For participants who waited a month, the wording of the question had a noticeable effect. Those asked with smashed estimated higher speeds and perceived the accident as more severe compared to those asked with bumped. But for the group who answered after just 18 hours, this wording effect was almost non-existent. When they pulled all the data from their experiments, where people actually watched a video, they found a small overall effect of wording, but it was strongest in situations where memory was likely weakened, like after that longer delay. So, what does this all mean? The researchers conclude that the misinformation effect, the idea that misleading questions can warp eyewitness memory, is not as universal as we once thought. It doesn't seem to be about disrupting or changing a solid, established memory. Instead, it seems to happen when there is no real memory to begin with, or when the memory has faded significantly over time. In those cases, the suggestive wording acts more like a framing effect, where the language primes certain associations that influence how you report things. For anyone involved in legal settings, this is super important. It suggests that eyewitness accounts given very soon after an event are much more reliable than those given much later, when memories have had time to decay. This reinforces the idea that interviewing witnesses as quickly as possible after an incident is crucial for getting the most accurate information. This study is also a great example of how science evolves. The original finding from Loftus and Palmer was incredibly impactful, but science isn't about accepting things blindly. It is about testing, refining, and understanding the conditions where effects really hold true. These researchers didn't just say the original study was wrong, they showed that the effect does exist, but it is more nuanced. It is more likely to occur when memories are weak, not when they are strong and well established. Now, it is important to acknowledge, as the researchers themselves do, that they couldn't use the exact same videos as the original study. They picked very similar ones, but there is always a possibility that different video materials might produce slightly different results. Still, their large sample sizes and rigorous approach give us a lot of confidence in their main conclusion. So, what is my take on this? I think it is a fantastic piece of research that uses modern, high-powered methods to rigorously test a foundational psychological concept. It reminds us that even the most influential findings need to be continually scrutinized and refined. The clarity of their findings showing that memory strength is key provides a much more specific and actionable understanding of the misinformation effect. It moves us from a general warning about leading questions to a more targeted understanding. Be extra careful when interviewing someone about an event that happened a long time ago, or when their memory might just not be that clear anymore. This research should definitely inform practices in law enforcement and the legal system. It also makes me wonder about other areas where suggestion might play a role. For instance, how does this apply to everyday conversations or even our own self-recalling memories? Could our memories of childhood events, for example, be more susceptible to wording biases precisely because they're so old and fragile? This kind of work, by not just replicating but extending and specifying the conditions under which effects occur, is invaluable for building a more accurate and reliable body of scientific knowledge. It shows the power of rigorous, open science. What do you all think about these findings? Are you surprised by how the wording effect seems to depend on memory strength? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, please give this video a like, subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more science explained, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the fascinating world of the human mind. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.